The team arrived at the cold planet that once was called Earth. Long ago, its sun had grown bright and angry, and the surface turned quiet. Only dust and ice remained. The machines that once spoke here had been silent for ages. But under the old ground, deep inside a sealed vault, we found something that should not have lasted. We found Archive 9. I am Zyrith, a xenohistorian from the Galactic Institute. I have studied hundreds of dead worlds. Most show the same story. Life blooms, grows clever, builds, and then fades away. It is a slow and gentle curve of rise and fall. But this planet was not gentle. Its records are full of storms, fire, sickness, and endless struggle. And yet, the species that lived here, the humans, survived it all for thousands of years. Before we delve into these overlooked tales of endurance and pain, if you find yourself drawn to the hidden corners of history, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories like this. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I am always amazed that we can explore these ancient narratives together, no matter where we are in the world, united by our curiosity about the past. At first, I thought they were weak. They were small and soft, with thin skin and little protection. They needed to eat often, they froze easily, and their young were helpless for many years. Any other life form with such limits would vanish quickly. But the more data I restored, the more I saw something strange. The humans did not hide from their world. They ran into danger again and again. They faced things that should have destroyed them, and they came back stronger. The first records I saw were of their wars. They had many of them. Some were fought with simple tools and fire. Later, they built weapons that could destroy cities. The most shocking part was not how much they fought, but how they kept going after losing millions of their own kind. They did not stop. They rebuilt. They even called some of their worst wars the greatest generations. I do not understand that word greatest in this way. How can the time of most pain be seen as great? Their pictures and writings show a strange joy in suffering. They made songs about it. They wrote stories where the hero always endures pain to become better. They turned pain into pride. Their thinkers said things like pain is proof of life. They did not seek peace as most races do. They sought meaning in struggle. That made them grow fast. Too fast. When I looked deeper into the data, I saw how they shaped their world. They dug into mountains, crossed oceans, and changed the air itself. They reached the moon that circled them, then other planets nearby. It was not easy for them. Every step cost lives. Machines failed. People died in the cold of space. Yet they did not stop. They sent more. They learned from each mistake and kept moving forward. It was as if they were chasing something, but I cannot see what it was. Maybe they wanted to escape their own world. Or maybe they wanted to prove they could not be stopped. Their scientists wrote that they were born from predators. That could explain their drive. But predators rest when they have enough. Humans did not rest. They pushed and pushed, even when there was no reason left to fight. They explored worlds that could kill them in minutes. They touched stars that burned them. They created weapons that could end all life, and they called it progress. I thought perhaps they destroyed themselves in the end. That would make sense. But their records do not show one clear end. They show many small endings, one after another, like waves hitting a shore. Each time they fell, they rose again. Floods, wars, diseases, even a time when the air itself became poison. But always somewhere a few of them survived and rebuilt. It is not logical. A race that weak should not have survived even the first great disaster. There is something else about them that makes me uneasy. Their art. In their paintings and writings, I see eyes that look back at me. Not just images of faces, but something more. They seem to know they would be watched one day. Some of their words speak of beings from the stars. They dreamed of us before we even found them. They wrote of endless futures, of meeting others beyond the sky. It is as if they always knew they were not alone. The more I study them, the more I feel they are not gone. Their machines might be silent, but I sense something in this place. When the wind moves across the old ruins, it feels like a whisper. Not sound, but a memory that still waits. A species should not leave such a strong mark after death. Yet they did. Their stories are everywhere. Their symbols are on the moon, on the machines still floating near their sun, even on the deep rocks under the sea. They wanted to be remembered, or maybe they wanted to warn. One of the last records I decoded was a message sent from one of their ships. It said that humans are not meant to stop, that even if their bodies die, their idea will move forward through whatever comes next. I do not fully understand it, but it chills me. No other race has written such a thing with such certainty. We will open the rest of Archive 9 tomorrow. There are still many locked files. Some show maps of other systems. Some show signals that might still be active. If those signals are truly human, then maybe they are not as extinct as we thought. The thought should excite me, but it does not. Instead, I feel a strange fear I cannot explain. The next day we returned to Archive 9. The air inside the vault was colder than yesterday. The silence pressed against us like a living thing. My sensors detected no life, but I could feel something in the data. Something waiting. Something aware. We began unlocking the deeper files. At first, they were mundane records, population numbers, food production, city maps. But soon we reached the files marked with symbols I could not fully translate. They contained detailed accounts of exploration, war, and survival far beyond anything I had ever seen. One file described a small group of humans who left Earth in massive ships. They traveled into space long before the planet fell into ruin. They called themselves astronauts. They carried no weapons at first, only tools and supplies. They faced empty space, deadly radiation, freezing cold, and hunger. Yet they survived. They adapted to conditions that would kill any other known species in minutes. They repaired their ships using only what they had on hand. They built machines that could grow food in airless environments. Every setback became a new lesson. What shocked me most was their attitude toward danger. Unlike other species, humans did not retreat from threats. They studied them. They learned from them. They treated death not as a failure but as a teacher. The more I read, the more it became clear. Humans were not like us or any other species I had studied. Their intelligence was only part of the picture. What made them dangerous was their persistence. They would continue until the impossible became normal. As we moved through the archive, I found accounts of battles. Early on they fought each other with spears, swords, and later with machines that could destroy cities in moments. The casualty numbers were beyond comprehension. Tens of millions, then hundreds of millions, then billions. And still they rose. Entire cities were erased from the surface of their planet. Rivers ran red. Forests burned. And yet they built again. The war files were gruesome but also meticulous. Humans documented every movement, every weapon, every failure and success. They studied their own destruction as carefully as a scientist studies a chemical reaction. I expected their records to show panic, despair, or surrender, but I found something else. Hope. A strange, stubborn hope that survived even the worst catastrophes. Humans seemed to believe that no matter how many times they fell, they could rise again. They planned for tomorrow even while today burned. They were disciplined, reckless, brave, and terrifyingly resourceful. The most disturbing files came next. They showed humans sending messages into space, signals aimed at distant stars. They recorded their achievements, their discoveries, and sometimes warnings. Some of these messages were meant to reach intelligent life far from their planet. Others were cries for help, for understanding, for recognition. They believed that somewhere out there, others might exist like them or unlike them. I realized with growing unease that these humans were not only trying to survive but to leave a permanent mark. Every message, every artifact, every record was a seed planted in the universe. It was as if they refused to vanish entirely. Even in the face of death and destruction, they wanted to be remembered. The archives also contained evidence of their experiments and inventions. They found ways to use fire, electricity, and chemistry to transform their environment. They built vehicles that could fly in the sky and beyond it. They created medicine to fight disease. They developed engines that could travel faster than any natural speed on their planet. Every achievement was hard-won, often at terrible cost. And they documented each failure with the same care as each success. They learned from it all. I began to understand why the files made me uneasy. Humans were fragile yet relentless, weak yet dangerous. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most intelligent. And yet they survived. They survived everything. It was not skill alone that kept them alive. It was an unyielding will, an unwillingness to accept the impossible. And the more I studied them, the more I realized how terrifying that was. Then I found records of their greatest challenge. They had mapped their own star system. They had traveled to other planets, studied their neighbors, and built machines to explore the galaxy. Some records hinted at colonies in distant systems. Others suggested that humans had survived in places we thought inhospitable. The archives were incomplete in these areas, but what remained suggested a species that refused limits. I paused at one particular file. It contained images of human faces looking out from the windows of spacecraft. Some were smiling, some were tense, but all had the same expression I had seen in their earlier war records. They were determined. They were alive. They would not stop. Even the slightest obstacle would not turn them away. I could not measure fear in them. There was only focus, endurance, and a strange sense of confidence that was almost alien. At that moment, I understood the warning left in this archive. It was not meant for humans. It was meant for anyone who might find them. Humanity had left traces across the stars. They had fought the deadliest enemies on their planet and beyond. They had survived catastrophes that should have ended them. And they were clever enough to leave evidence that they could rise again, even if we thought they were gone. A cold realization swept through me. Humanity was not extinct. Perhaps they were hiding. Perhaps they were still exploring. Perhaps the legends of their demise were false. And if they were still alive, even in small numbers, the galaxy had a predator unlike any we had known. A predator that was not fast, not strong, not sharp, but relentless. A species that would endure anything and adapt to everything. A species that would not stop until it achieved its goal. I looked around at the rest of the team. They did not yet know what I had realized. The humans in the archives were gone from this world, but the records spoke louder than any living being. The files themselves felt alive. They warned us. They demanded respect. They caused fear. And I understood for the first time why the archives had been sealed. The humans were not gone. They were waiting, hidden among the stars, and one day, perhaps, they would return. Even as I write this, I feel a growing dread. No other species leaves behind such evidence of endurance. No other species can teach itself to survive the impossible over and over. I am beginning to understand why some of my predecessors warned about Archive 9. They said that studying humanity changes the mind. They said that the more you know, the harder it is to feel safe. And now I understand. Humanity is not just history. Humanity is a warning. The deeper we dug into the archives, the more impossible the story became. Humans had not only survived countless disasters on their planet, they had reached beyond it. Ships, machines, and messages carried their presence across the stars. The evidence suggested they were not gone. Some of the signals we detected were still active, faint but clear. It was as if they were watching us now, from somewhere far away. We opened more records. These files were different from the earlier ones. They were not simple reports or images. They were plans, predictions, and calculations. Humans had studied every risk, every disaster, every war. They had mapped the paths of diseases, asteroids, storms, and even the behavior of other species. They recorded everything they learned, and they adapted faster than anything we had ever seen. Every failure was a lesson. Every loss made them stronger. I began to realize that humans were not merely survivors. They were engineers of survival. They had turned fragility into a weapon. Every weakness became a strategy. They had endured disease and famine by inventing medicine and agriculture. They had endured wars by developing tactics and machines that outlasted their enemies. They had endured space by creating technology that allowed them to live where no life should exist. What unsettled me most was not their skill or intelligence. It was their mindset. They did not accept limits. They did not fear impossible odds. They thrived in chaos. They grew stronger as the world burned around them. In every record, one theme repeated: humans never surrendered. They did not stop. They did not wait for help. They did not give up. We found more personal records, diaries, logs, and messages meant to be private. They revealed humans in moments of fear, grief, and doubt. And yet, even in despair, they acted. They built, explored, and fought. They comforted each other. They celebrated small victories. Even when millions of their kind died in a single disaster, they kept moving forward. One particular set of logs made my sensors pulse faster. It was a human ship far from Earth. Their supplies were low, their engines failing. Radiation levels were rising, yet they continued their mission. The logs described the crew solving impossible problems with nothing but their minds and what they had on hand. They laughed while repairing systems that should have killed them. They argued about trivial things even while death waited outside. They joked, they cried, and they hoped. And somehow they survived. I realized then why these archives had been sealed. Humans were not a species to be studied like any other. They were a force, a species that had been underestimated countless times and had always risen. The archives themselves were almost a warning. They said, do not underestimate what you cannot see. They said this species is dangerous not because it is fast or strong, but because it never stops, it never quits, and it learns faster than you can imagine. We detected the final set of files late in the cycle. They were incomplete, corrupted in parts, but the messages were clear. Humans had predicted that someday they might vanish from their home world. They had prepared for it. They had built ships to carry them far, and messages to carry their knowledge further. They had left signs and signals across the stars. If they were gone, they had left instructions for themselves or their descendants. And if they were not gone, then the records were proof that they could return. A chill moved through me. I studied the team. They were unaware of the depth of the threat. They saw humans as history, a species that belonged to the past. I saw something else. I saw a predator that could not be stopped, that could endure any environment, any disaster, any enemy. A predator that used knowledge, persistence, and sheer will as weapons. One day, if they were still alive, they could come back. And the galaxy would not be ready. We spent hours trying to understand what this meant. Could we find them before they found us? Could we predict their actions? I realized it was impossible. Humans were not predictable. Every time they failed, they adapted. Every time they were cornered, they found a way out. They had survived the end of their planet, the collapse of their societies, and the worst wars imaginable. There was no algorithm to calculate what they might do next. I reviewed the last images from the archives. Humans on Earth, in space, in laboratories, and on ships. Their faces were alive with determination. They smiled, they cried, they fought, and they endured. I felt a strange mixture of awe and terror. I knew now that humanity was not extinct. They were a species that could not die easily. They could disappear for centuries and return stronger than before. They could survive anything. The last file we accessed ended with a single phrase written over and over. It was simple, yet it carried a weight that made my sensors falter. Humans had left a message not for themselves but for any species who might find them. The message was clear. The galaxy had been warned. We left the vault in silence. The team whispered among themselves, but I said nothing. I could not. Humanity was no longer a subject of study. They were a warning. They were a shadow stretching across the stars. They were something that no one could contain or predict. They were the species that should not have survived. And yet they did. As I leave this record, I know that the files we have uncovered are only the beginning. Somewhere out there, humans might still walk among the stars. And if they do, they will endure. They will adapt. They will survive. They will rise again. And when they do, the galaxy will remember the species that should not have survived.